Hello again, baseball fans. I'm Mitch Gatzke. This is the fourth episode of Ducks on the Pod. Welcome in. Great to have you along. Bit of a transitional week as we switch over from focusing on the World Baseball Classic and Team USA's 8-0 victory in the championship game against Puerto Rico last Wednesday. Now we can focus on Major League Baseball as the games start on Sunday afternoon. Cause for great excitement. But some loose ends that we still need to tie up with that WBC finishing up. So we'll do that and start to look ahead to this summer's season. Now let's check today's starting lineup. Leading off this week, Ian Kinsler made some comments about some of the cultural differences that we see in baseball. And one of my favorite baseball writers, Jonah Keri, had his own interpretation of what Kinsler meant. I have a bit of a bone to pick with Keri about his interpretation of those comments. We'll get into that. In the all-important second spot, Buster Olney had some terrible ideas for improving the World Baseball Classic in future editions. We'll discuss why those ideas are so bad. Batting third, some statistical trends to keep your eye on as we prepare for 2017. Some pretty interesting things have started to and continued to happen in the last few years in baseball, and we'll take a look at those. And cleaning up this week, your guide to the 2017 season. I've got one date from each month that you'll want to circle on your calendars as we get ready for the summer. And at this time, I'd like to welcome in our good friend Ham Porter. Ham, take it away. Jonah Keri, if you're not my favorite baseball writer, you're certainly on the short list. However, you're putting words in Ian Kinsler's mouth, and I'm not going to let it slide just because I like your work. Here's what Kinsler actually said through a column by the New York Times' Billy Witz. Kinsler says, "I hope kids watching the WBC can watch the way we play the game and appreciate the way we play the game, as opposed to the way Puerto Rico plays or the Dominican plays. That's not taking anything away from them. That just wasn't the way we were raised. They were raised differently to show emotion and passion when you play. We do show emotion. We do show passion. But we just do it in a different way." Now, Jonah Keri, here's what you implied that he said. That the U.S. players play the game in a better way. That Kinsler feels he, his team, his country are above the other participants of the tournament. Give me a break, Jonah Keri. If you're going to bring your politics into baseball, at least do it in opposition of someone saying something that actually needs rebuttal. Kinsler stated facts, and I see absolutely nothing wrong with it. Might he have worded his statement a bit better? Sure. But he's a ball player, not a writer. Now, I'm guessing Keri's main issues here lie in Kinsler's use of the words appreciate and differently. Kinsler literally said the U.S. plays differently than Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and he hopes kids watching appreciate that. You are twisting those words to imply that Kinsler wants kids to play the game his way because it's better. Shame. Now, I agree with Keri's assessment that Major League Baseball is overly regulated by its set of ridiculous unwritten rules that take a lot of the fun out of the game. I've said before, let guys flip bats and pander to onlooking fans. Lighten up, baseball. I get it. I'm with you. But when it comes to the World Baseball Classic, might Team USA's place in the World Baseball pecking order have something to do with their more reserved nature on the diamond? I'd say so. The U.S. has immense advantages over every baseball nation. That is no secret. They're expected to win even though they never did until this go-around. So could those expectations, both internal and external, play a role in the more subdued celebrations that we see from the U.S.? I don't see how it couldn't. Let's not turn this into something it isn't. Kinsler did not say, "Our way is the way the game is supposed to be played, and all others be damned." He simply identified a cultural difference that is not only understandable, but also widely accepted. Earlier this month, when Andrelton Simmons was interviewed for a piece on ESPN.com, the following resulted. When asked, what impressed you the most about Major League Baseball clubhouses? Simmons replied, "It's different. Everything here is more quiet, more peaceful. They let you play. In Curacao, everyone is yelling, cheering. There's a louder atmosphere there. I'm still getting used to it. Some ball players, such as the Cuban ones, are always yelling, whistling, cheering on the pitcher on every throw he makes." When asked, is baseball's code different here? Simmons says, baseball is the same no matter where it's played. The only difference is that in my country, when you play, people yell, talk a lot, taunt players in order to provoke them. Here, things are more quiet. That's the only difference I've felt whenever I play. Now, is this Simmons' way of saying American baseball is second rate? Of course not. He's acknowledging a difference in the culture, in the way the game is played, watched, accepted, loved. So I'm confused why Kinsler gets attacked for doing the same. Besides, Ian Kinsler is not one to pull punches. We know that. He is known as one of the most outspoken players in baseball. While showing me this last week and asking how I felt about it, a buddy of mine, Drew Detlinger, reminded me of the remarks that Kinsler had for the Rangers when they traded him away to the Tigers a few years ago. Kinsler said back then, "To be honest with you, I hope they go 0-162. I got friends and I love my friends, but I hope they lose their ass." Now, does this sound like a man who's going to tiptoe around issues? A man who's not going to say exactly what he means? You tell me. Better yet, ask Kinsler himself. So in conclusion, baseball fans, the word different does not in itself carry with it the negative connotation that we often attach to it. That's exactly what Jonah Keri is doing here, attaching additional meaning to turn Kinsler's harmless statement into an apparent slam on Latin baseball culture. Though I thoroughly enjoy the man's work, I did not fall for Jonah Keri's word-twisting tricks, and I hope you didn't either. ESPN's Buster Olney wrote something last week after the conclusion of the WBC about how to improve it. And I admire the fact that he's trying to improve the tournament and make it a better thing, but his ideas are just off the wall. I mean, first of all, let's start with the concept of making this an annual tournament. Does he really think that people who don't care enough about this thing already are going to care more if it's just happening more often? There's no way that would work. But I do have a compromise, because I think it should happen more often than every 4 years, but not every single year. Let's compromise and make this an every other year sort of thing, biannually. That way, it's still a special occasion, but it doesn't just blend into the rest of the baseball calendar as it would if it happened every single year. And secondly, this is kind of a side issue, but I really don't understand all this complaining about the best players not participating in this tournament. Okay, so Clayton Kershaw, Mike Trout, Addison Bumgarner, Chris Bryant, they all opted out. But it's not like Team USA was lacking. Nolan Arenado, Buster Posey, Paul Goldschmidt, Andrew McCutchen. Are these Gold Glovers, All-Stars, and MVPs insufficient? That's not even to mention Giancarlo Stanton, who many think is one of the more exciting players in the game right now because the ferocity with which he hits the ball, the sheer distance of his home runs. Maybe I'm too much of a baseball fanatic to be a fair judge here, but do casual fans really not know these guys? And if so, please ask for help. I would be glad, I would be more than happy to introduce the players that even the most casual of baseball fans should know about. That Team USA roster was loaded with them. Christian Yelich had a hell of a tournament. Adam Jones, obviously, with a game-winning RBI and a game-saving catch. Just the leadership he showed on the field. Ian Kinsler, who we talked about earlier in the show. Brandon Crawford was automatic at shortstop. And we haven't talked about any of the pitchers who did a tremendous job. From Chris Archer to Tanner Roark to Danny Duffy, Pat Neshek coming out of the bullpen. I mean, that list goes on. I could keep going. My thing is, if you don't know these names, that's more of a reflection on you than it is the players who are deciding to not play. That's their decision. It's a business decision. But you can also decide to better immerse yourself in the game and get familiar with guys who are stars. Anyway, the last idea I want to get into here, and it's the biggest one from this article, which you can check out in the links I should have mentioned earlier. This is on me. My bad, guys. But again, the links to everything that I'm talking about here on this show, find them at fourlights.fm/ducks/4. That's how you get all the links to all the articles I've been discussing throughout the show. And again, that web address will only change with every episode. You just change the number. So next week, add a 5 on there. You can find all the links. Anyway, the last idea here that Olney has for us. He says the bulk of the WBC could be played in spring training, with the semifinals and championship games becoming part of All-Star Week in July. He suggests the Home Run Derby on Monday night, then the semifinals of the World Baseball Classic on Tuesday, the All-Star Game happening on Wednesday, and then the World Baseball Classic final on Thursday night. Then he says the sport can take a 3-day weekend for rest. Now that sounds good, but when you think about it, these teams are already not cool with the idea of guys missing spring training and the possibility of them getting hurt before the season. Can you imagine the outrage that would result if one of these all-stars who gets picked to play for his country gets hurt in one of those semifinals or the final and is then unavailable for the rest of the Major League Baseball season? When you're looking at teams, they're finally starting to shape up who's contending, who's not. What if a contender loses their ace? What happens then? So I just don't see that as a viable option. It's a great idea, and it's cute to say. But when you get into the reality of it, it's not going to happen. And sure, players are in midseason form at that point. Their performance and the quality of the games might be a little bit better playing it in July as opposed to March. But when you look at the logistics, owners and GMs are not going to have this. They already have a tough enough time letting their players play during spring training when the games don't count. Imagine moving it to the middle of the season. Not going to happen. So, Buster Olney, I applaud you for trying to improve this tournament, but I question how much you really thought about this, because it didn't take me very long to shoot a lot of holes in just about every one of your ideas. MLB.com writer Matt Kelly published something that I find fascinating today. He took a look at some of the statistical trends that we're seeing emerge over the past few seasons in baseball, and I wanted to share these things with you because, I mean, if you are a fan of the game, you're going to want to know this stuff. So the first one is about home runs and just how much they're happening now. Big league hitters in 2016 homered on a higher percentage of batted balls than any other year in the live ball era. That's since 1920. So that means when guys hit the ball, a higher percentage of those hits were home runs than ever, basically ever before. And I end the show by saying, I find it fascinating that More guys are hitting more home runs than ever before, despite the fact that pitchers are more unhittable than ever. And these numbers bear that out. Kelly goes on to say that hitters tallied 1.2% more home runs on batted balls in 2016 than they did just 2 years ago. And that number is higher than it ever was in the steroid era of the 1990s and early 2000s. So guys might not be juicing, but they're still hitting home runs at an alarming rate, an even more alarming rate, really. And as a result of this, we're seeing a change in how runs are scored. A staggering 40.2% of all runs scored in 2016 came off homers. That's a new all-time record. The effort was led by the Mets, who generated 51.1% of their scoring off the long ball to set a new National League record. So the New York Mets last season basically just said, all right, we're going to hit it out of the park and go station to station. No taking the extra base, no stealing a base. Just get on, wait for the guy behind you to knock one out. And it worked pretty well for him, for the most part. Second point that Kelly makes is he mentions that last year only 932 intentional walks were issued in the majors last year. This is interesting because of the new rule change. Managers now only have to motion the umpire and they'll send him down to first base. They don't have to go through the formality of throwing those 4 pitches wide of home plate. Well, apparently that's not going to do much at all to speed up the game, because that number, 932, is the fewest intentional walks of any season since 1962, and the number has diminished over each of the past 5 seasons. So I look for that to continue to trend downward despite the rule change, where it just becomes automatic. Kelly says if you noticed more pitching changes last year, your eyes did not deceive you, and I talked about this on last week's show. People that are worried about pitchers not going very far in these World Baseball Classic games really better get over it, because this is the way that baseball is being played now. Kelly goes on to detail just how many pitching changes were made and how that number far exceeds anything that we've ever seen. He says that Major League Baseball pitchers averaged roughly 5 2/3 innings per start in 2016. That is the lowest rate in history. And they combined for fewer than 100 complete games for the first time in history. He also notes that in the postseason, the Indians came oh so close to winning it all, while their starters averaged only 4 2/3 innings per game. So clearly, the bullpen can get the job done. He also mentions that starters who routinely go deep into the later innings are getting fewer and farther between. Only 5 pitchers who qualified for last year's ERA title recorded quality starts in at least 75% of their outings. That's the fewest since 2009. The fourth point, bunting is becoming less and less of a thing in baseball now. Big leaguers laid down 1,025 sacrifice bunts last year. That is the fewest in modern baseball history. And 2016 was the 6th straight season in which we've seen a steady decline in that number. Teams are playing for that big inning. And oftentimes the team that has that big inning, where they score, 5, 6, 7 runs in one inning, those are the teams that go on to win the game more often than not. And when you sacrifice bunt, you're giving away an out. And that really kills your big inning. I think it was legendary Baltimore Orioles manager Earl Weaver who put it this way, saying he would rather have 3 chances with a man on second as opposed to 2 with a man on third. Fifth and final point that Matt Kelly brings up in this MLB.com piece is that the live ball era is getting less lively. He talks about the proposed rule change to the strike zone, bringing the bottom of it up to the top of the knee, and how umpires are starting to call strikes more and more just below the knee. He says that a bigger strike zone means more strikeouts, obviously, and Major League Baseball hitters set a new all-time record for strikeout rates in each of the past 9 seasons, peaking last year when they punched out 21.1% of their plate appearances. That's an astounding number. So really what we're seeing now in baseball is that all or nothing mentality come into play more so than ever before. And he gets into the root of the issue right at the end here when he says you combine that strikeout rate with the walk rate that consistently hovers between 8 and 9%. He says, and we saw more inaction last year than at any other point in the past 100 years. So basically 29.3% of all plate appearances in Major League Baseball ended in either a walk or a strikeout. That's too much, at least in Commissioner Rob Manfred's opinion. And I think I agree with them, but his rule changes aren't going to affect that. The things that he's proposing are not going to change that. So it will be interesting to see what he can come up with to actually address the real issue here. The fact is, the games aren't too long. They're just too dull. Things aren't happening enough. Plays aren't ending in a deep fly to center field and the guy goes all the way back to the track and makes a diving catch. They're ending in punch-outs and free bases. It's not very exciting, and Rob Manfred has his work cut out for him trying to fix it. So keep your eye on those statistical trends, those being the inactivity in the game, less bunting, more relievers, fewer walks, and a whole lot more homers. All right, baseball fans, bust out those calendars, check out the guide to the 2017 season, and get ready to mark these dates down. I've got one for each month, starting with April 10th, the Cubs home opener against the Dodgers. It's an NLCS rematch and possibly an NLCS preview. I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that. But you know that whole weekend is going to be a huge celebration as the Cubs come back home to their fans for the first time since early November when they clinched the first World Series in however many years it was. It doesn't matter anymore because they are officially the defending champs. They'll be getting their rings that weekend, and they'll be taking on a pretty damn good team while doing it. Now, May 7th, Yankees at Cubs. This is the former Evil Empire versus the new Evil Empire. And if you don't believe me, just watch the Cubs this season because they are, without a doubt, the team to beat, just the same way that the New York Yankees were back in the late 90s. It's clear everybody knows who the champs are and who the champs should be, but now it's up to the Cubs to do the deed. June 18th is Father's Day, of course. Every team is slated to play with 15 games on the docket. Matchups of interest include Nationals at Mets, Marlins at Braves, Cardinals at Orioles, Red Sox at Astros, Padres Brewers, Marlins Rangers, and Giants Rockies. Take your pops to the ball game. It's guaranteed to be a good day or your money back. Not for me, though. July 4th, by far the most underrated holiday on our calendar, first of all. From the reason we're celebrating, to the best weather of any holiday that we have, to the long weekend that we're going to have this year with the holiday falling on a Tuesday, the great food, the fireworks. Every time I see fireworks, I just think of the Sandlot scene. I would love to play under the light of fireworks, but it's not realistic, is it? And of course, there is baseball all day long this year because Major League Baseball has blessed us with an 11:05 a.m. first pitch, meaning that you really can watch baseball all day long. You can start with the Mets at the Nationals, flip over to the Giants and Tigers 2 hours later, the Rays and the Cubs start an hour after that, Pirates at Phillies at 4:05, Royals at Mariners 2.5 hours later, Red Sox at Rangers at 8 o'clock, Diamondbacks and Dodgers for the nightcap. Honorable mention, I know I said I had one for each month, but it's my show, so I do what I want. Here we go. It's All-Star Weekend, and I cherish this 3-day celebration of baseball very much. The Futures game is way cool, getting to see all the future stars perform on a pretty big stage there. The Home Run Derby, of course, is captivating.
Back, gone.
The All-Star game is awesome. It's easily the best of any sport. And it's going to be even better now that it doesn't mean anything, as they like to keep saying. It will no longer determine home field advantage in the World Series. Speaking of the World Series, on August 20th, the Cardinals and the Pirates will play in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, the site of the Little League World Series. And this is just a fantastic idea with that tournament going on. It's really cool that they're going to be rewarding these kids, especially the world teams who travel in from all around the world and probably don't get to see any Major League Baseball. This will be a big day for them. September 25th and 26th officially starts the home stretch and the second to last series of the season. Got a full schedule. It's Orioles and Pirates, Rays and Yankees, Nationals, Phils, Braves, Mets, Twins and Tribe, Jays and Sox, Bo Sox, the Reds and the Brewers, Astros and Rangers, Angels and White Sox, Cubs and Cardinals, Tigers and Royals, Marlins and Rockies, Giants and D-backs, Mariners and Athletics, and Padres and Dodgers. Whew! Then October 3rd, postseason play begins. Predictions to come later in the week. Stay tuned. I am working frantically on getting all of my thoughts together for a full division preview for each of the 6 divisions, as well as predictions for playoffs. Stay tuned for more news on that. But yeah, those are the dates that you're going to want to be available for as far as baseball is concerned. And that really is the beauty of this game. You could tune in and out because the season is 6 months long. But it's way more fun when you're tuned in the whole time.
I may be wrong, but I doubt it.
All right, baseball fans, I think I've done enough damage for 1 week. Again, my name is Mitch Gatzke. I'll be your host on Ducks on the Pod all season long. Thanks again for joining me. Please remember to subscribe, rate, review, share with your friends. Follow us on Twitter at Ducks on the Pod. Like the Facebook page. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you want to know as we hurl our way into the 2017 season. Remember, by this time next week, we will have seen the first games of Major League Baseball. I hope you're ready because I sure as hell am. So please allow me to introduce myself again. I am a pitcher's duel loving, Mike Trout hating, rain delay waiting, war stat disregarding baseball fanatic. I prefer the National League set of rules and the added strategy in the senior circuit. I find it fascinating that more players are hitting more home runs than ever before, in spite of the fact that pitchers are more unhittable than ever. I firmly believe in the magical powers of a 2-2 count with 2 men out. I was in attendance for Armando Galarraga's perfect game that wasn't. I've been to 9 Major League ballparks, including Wrigley, Fenway, and the real Yankee Stadium. Not that trophy case they play in now. And most important of all, I realized long ago that I love baseball far more than it will ever love me, but I refuse to let that or my affinity for my hometown team obstruct my enjoyment of the game. That's it for me. Thanks again for listening. Be sure to tune in next week for more Ducks on the Pod. And until then, keep your glove on the dirt, your bat off your shoulder, and always keep your eye on the ball.